evening, everyone, and welcome to a new episode of Thriving Thursdays, Multilingualism Matters. If you're new here, I want you to know that this is a project designed by SIETAR Austria, the Society for Intercultural Education, Training and Research. My name is Karin Martin, and I'm the host of this Expert Talks series. And if you want to find out more about SIETAR Austria, you can check out our website, www.sietar.at. Also, feel free to contact us if you have any questions or suggestions. And today I'm really honored that I have Professor Georg Gombos, Georg, here with me for the second time. So dear Georg, thank you so much for accepting our invitation.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me.
Great. So as we mentioned last time, you teach intercultural education, multilingualism at the Department of Educational Sciences at the Alps Adriatic University in Klagenfurt. And you also work part-time as a psychotherapist and coach. Last time during our talk, we discussed a lot about linguistic diversity. So we talked about regional languages, minority languages, migrant languages. And today we want to go a little bit deeper and also touch upon the topic of linguistic discrimination and many other issues. So I would like to start with this idea of having too many languages in a specific context. Let's take Austria as an example. And we were just preparing the talk, and you mentioned there are more than 200 languages in Austria. So the question would be, what can we do? How can we support this linguistic diversity? What are your thoughts in terms of individuals, the state? So let's start with a general overview.
Okay, perhaps we start with children at school. And
Great.
We know from research that it's vital and it's important for the kids that the knowledge that they bring and the skills that they bring to school, that they are being seen as a resource, as a potential, and are being used to build upon whatever they have to learn at school. Now this includes, of course, the languages in which those kids have developed so far as far as when they get to school. Now and mother tongue education would be something very important in that respect, because that would further develop the language, the original language, which, by the way, is threatened because the environment, the linguistic environment, is a smaller one than it would be at home, so to say, not home, but in the country of origin. So mother tongue education, continuous one, would be great, and would actually help the kid also to learn the dominant language, which in our case is German. There are studies that show that there's a connection between the two languages, L1 and L2, and if you sort of promote both, then you get extra positive results. Now, the problem we have is, apart from the fact that the government is not really in favor of this, and that we have very little mother tongue education in Austria, we have another problem, namely we have just for a limited number of languages, we have that mother tongue education, mainly for the bigger immigrant groups like Bosnian, Serbian, Croatian on the one hand, or Turkish on the other hand. But we estimate that there are about 200 languages, meaning speakers of those languages, that live in Austria, although Austria is a small country with 9 million inhabitants, but still, so it's practically impossible to provide mother tongue education for every child, regardless of the L1. So the question, of course, arises, what do we do now? Well, there are several answers which help, I think, along the way. But the real solution is, I think, not really in sight. It's just ideas that can improve the situation from the standpoint of the kids. So one is a very basic one, namely respect. If we do not have respect for what they bring along, or to the contrary, we see this as a problem, possibly a huge problem, and tell them you should only speak and learn German or the dominant language of your country, and you should forget because your language is useless, it's ugly, just forget about it. If we have this kind of attitude, then of course the kids will feel this and they will be reluctant to come out with their linguistic ideas and skills, because it's not nice if you try something and then you're being told that you're not a nice person doing that and you should better stop that. So respect would be the first big thing, because respect then can be translated into concrete acting. How do you act on? So you show that respect to the kids, you invite those languages in and you use them in your teaching. That will be an important part. By the way, in really multicultural classrooms, which we do have, especially in the big cities, it's quite normal to have I don't know, 25 kids and about 20 languages, different languages. This happens. So there's an awful lot to learn from each other, an awful lot to learn about languages as such. And we know that helps kids to become more precise in languages, to be open for learning other languages. So there's a lot of positive things to be gained from that. So that is the sort of the practical part of it. And then there are a lot of teachers who do that, fortunately, but I still think they are a minority, and I still think that the respect for those kids is not everywhere the general attitude. The other thing one would have to do, and actually that would, I think that would need some more effort from the part of adult education institutions, namely to help facilitate the contact between the teachers and the immigrant parents, and have discussions, for example, about how they should deal with the languages at home, because we do not know how those children, how much they are exposed to their L1. We do not know how much they're exposed to L2 outside of school. We do not know, are they being read to? Do they read fairy tales or not? Do they listen to the radio or whatever? You know, we have very little information, and I feel that teachers would probably profit a lot if they had this information, but I fear that a lot of teachers would be sort of overwhelmed if they had to do this. If you think that a teacher has, I don't know how many kids to teach, between 2 to 100 or so, it's practically impossible to have good contact to the parents all the time. So I think that would be something for social workers or for adult education people to come in here and facilitate that and strengthen those parents. And so the main message should be to me is, one, your language is being respected. It makes a lot of sense that you teach your child that language well. This is your job, because we do not speak that language. We can try and help you, perhaps, give you some help you facilitate contact with speakers of your language. But basically, that is your job. The other thing is we ask you to be respectful towards the state language, showing the kid that it makes a lot of sense to learn that language, but leave that job up to us. It's us teachers who do that job. And the way we do it is by also accepting and inviting the linguistic experience of the children in. So we have this transitory thing.
Yes, I understand.
Experience, and we work on that.
Exactly. So it's a work of all the parts together towards the goal, right? And the goals should be for the children to feel comfortable in all their languages, to use their linguistic repertoires, but also to feel welcomed, right? So do you have an example, maybe a practical example from one of your students or children in terms of linguistic discrimination? How do a child feel if he feels that his or her language is not welcome at school? What are the consequences? Do you have some practical examples, please?
Yeah, an example could be that kids tend to get into identity problems, meaning that they because of the pressure around, because of sort of the mainstream of the dominant language, they want to be part of that. But if they are sort of being discriminated against and being told that you are Bosnian, Serbian, Turkish, or any kind of immigrant group that has not a high prestige. Of course, we're talking about low prestige migrant groups, not English, not American. That's great. Teachers, seem to welcome that, but they discriminate against other languages. So the kids might refuse to speak their L1 because they feel ashamed of it. But that shame has been put into them because they were shamed in certain situations. If you're sort of shamed 100 times because your hair is long, you might cut it someday because you're getting tired, or you suddenly feel that it's psychologically easier to say, okay, the short-haired ones are right and I'm wrong. But of course, this is you are you, and you need to have your own choices. And if we could go back to the kid, then all the resources, all the experience that they want to use to continue life learning.
Yes, I'm also thinking about a child being laughed, for example, for his accent. There's also a case when, they're still learning, so they do have an accent because they speak another language or even more than one. And I'm just trying to imagine how they feel, right? How bad could that be for a child, for a young child?
Exactly. We all have accents in the languages that are not our mother tongue. And we should be tolerant towards those accents, but unfortunately we are not. I mean, this is also, in rural places, this is even worse because there is a long tradition of experience of locals, monolingual locals, that sort of can hear whether you come from village A or village B. Because those from village B speak very, very little differently than those from village A. So that people have come to listen for that. And now, of course, in a multicultural society, you have millions of different accents. So, and of course, you can discriminate against that. You can use this.
Yes, exactly. Let's go back to the teachers again. I would like to elaborate a little bit on that. You mentioned that the job of the teacher would be to welcome all languages, to respect all languages, and also to mix children of different backgrounds in order for them to learn from each other. But as we know, sometimes teachers are a bit afraid. Maybe they do not understand what the children are saying. And, you know, there's this fear, yeah, just because they do not understand what the children are saying. So I was wondering, what's your opinion about that? Is this a problem? Is this an insecurity from side of the teachers? What is your opinion about that? This teachers' fear?
Yeah, I think there are several aspects. One aspect is that is simply not true. It's meaning that it will probably be very, very, very seldom that kids really do speak about the teacher and do really say something bad or plan or plot something bad. This would probably be the exception. So a lot of monolingual people think if other people speak another language in their presence, they somehow feel excluded. Yeah, they feel excluded. And are sort of convinced that they are being excluded, that this is done on purpose, so that they do not understand how those bad guys are plotting against them. Although this might simply not be the case, because in a multilingual society, we do have this problem that we cannot always say, look, let's be polite and let's use just one language, and then we would speak the language of the monolingual one because he just speaks one. You know, but that would lead to monolingualism. So we need to have some space so that the other languages can also be used. And sometimes they are being used sort of in a bilingual situation where not everybody speaks the second language. Now, people who grow up like I did, grow up with different languages and meeting people from different cultures, they are used to that. They're used to that. They do not understand everything, because if you speak more than one language, you usually do not speak those languages on the same level like your L1. So there's always something that you don't understand, but you do not automatically conclude that this is done against you. That would never occur to me. I'm pretty convinced that I would sense it if it was directed against me, but I do not start with that presumption that it will be against me. So this is one important aspect. The other aspect is, of course, a very basic one, namely, what kind of teacher are you? How do you manage your teaching in your classroom? If you manage this by sort of using and abusing your power, because you sort of cannot keep them disciplined otherwise, then of course you have this antagonistic relationship to your teachers, and then you might really feel threatened if they speak a language and you don't know what it means, you know. So that this is a question of power then. So, but if you're confident and you know that, you know, they react to whatever you want and they do their stuff and they communicate with you, so why the hell be afraid?
Yes, so basically it's important to for teachers also to have space to discuss their experience, right? So as you were saying, monolinguals have a completely different experience in comparison to bilinguals or multilinguals who are used to feel this the experience of not understanding what other people are talking about, this idea of being able to tolerate the situation where you do not understand. And do you think, is this also a topic for in the teacher training context? Do teachers, students have the possibility to talk about this in a safe place? What is the situation in teacher trainings?
Well, to be honest, I cannot tell you because I haven't done any research on what actually happens, but from the reactions I get when I speak about this topic is I still think we are far away from a culture of multilingualism. We still have to find out what that word means. It's not a fixed concept, but it's rather that we consciously get aware of how we could deal with multilingualism in a better way. One thing I suggest is that we talk about our experience. And of course, the more mixed the groups are, the more interesting those experiences are. So I had, for example, lovely workshops where basically I asked them people about their experience, biographical experience with languages, and the most vivid discussions happened, and it was very, very interesting, and everybody was high. Everybody liked to talk about it. The only ones who do not, or not, who might be reluctant, some of them, are the monolinguals. But even there, you have a lot of interested people who are happy to share those experiences or listen to the experiences they hear. So this speaking about linguistic experience is, I think, a very important issue. It has many different aspects, like how did your family deal with languages? What was the atmosphere like? What are your aims, your visions? What value do you attach to languages? What are you ready to do? By the way, this is also one of the things that we don't really do in education. Is I think we ask very, very seldom. We ask the students, hey, where do you want to go? What is your vision? What is the aim? We show them the curriculum and say, this is your aim. Yeah. Them where they are. And we never ask them, hey, what's this all good for? What do you want to do with your languages? Because that might make them reflect. And there, of course, I would have to show this respectful attitude.
Yes, totally agree.
Now, let me add perhaps one thing, is, because I think Professor Krum, whom we've heard together a couple of days ago, also mentioned this, that you need, of course, groups of different people with different backgrounds. I mean, if you have 90% monolinguals who have learned English, so to say, there's not that much to discuss. But if you have people from different linguistic and national background, then you get the really interesting discussions.
Yes, totally. I agree. You mentioned Professor Krum. So for the audience, we need to mention that some weeks ago, we joined an interesting conference together at the University of Teacher Education in Carinthia. And the conference title was Multilingualism as Chance. The goal of the conference was to sensitize education professionals to multilingualism, identity, and education. And as I mentioned at the beginning, one of the things that really that I found inspiring from one side, but also scary from the other side, was this idea of linguistic discrimination. And as you remember, Professor Krum mentioned some points, some key points related to linguistic discrimination. For example, the knowledge of German as a criterion of school readiness, or this idea of having separated class for German, for children learning German. Also, German entrance tests for future teacher students. And as we discussed already, this idea that mother tongue or L1 instruction is only on a voluntary basis, a voluntary exercise. So my final question to you would be, what is your definition for linguistic discrimination? How would you summarize this concept?
Before I summarize or try to summarize, I would like to say that we're back at the power question. And I think this is often neglected in the educational discourse. There's sort of always a group that has more power than the other. And the question is, how does the more powerful group deal with the less powerful group? And this is where I come in with the respect. And I believe that in schools and in educational institutions, we should not copy life out there in reality to 100%. We should also create some space, some secure space for individuals to develop. And even if we know that there's the dominant language and the higher prestigious languages are favored, English, French, Spanish, Italian. That's about the list, that's the end of the list probably. And then we have those languages that we do not estimate that, or do not give them prestige. And they're the majority, and they're the majority of the kids, yeah? How do we get those kids in, and how do we help them to develop all their potentials, because we will need their skills in the future. So I think in that, looking at it that way, we practically always have discrimination. The question is perhaps how strong is it? If the teacher himself or herself is sort of in favor of discriminating against groups, for example, by saying the kids must not speak their L1 to each other. We had a case, an example of students, going to observe teachers working, and there was a situation of a maths example where the teachers asked the kid, and the kid didn't know. So his neighbor asked the teacher, said, "Can I help him? Can I explain it to him?" And the teacher found it a good idea and said, "Yeah." But in the moment that the kid started speaking his L1 to his friend who had the same L1, and try to explain the concept, the mathematical concept to him in that L1, the teacher stopped them and said, "Stop, speak German." And that was the end of it, because the kid couldn't explain it as well. And the point was that the kid who didn't understand it might have understood it if he understood the terms, because he might know them in L1, but just didn't know them in L2. You see? So this will be a classical example of discrimination that is harmful, because it tells the kid, your language is not being respected. We do not want it here. You better shut up. And it's not a help. It's not a help for learning German, in this case, mathematics, which is of course wrong.
Wow, it's very powerful, right? So this idea that we need to support children's L1 to empower them in learning, also in learning subjects which have nothing to do with the language. I mean, of course, any subject is related to language and in certain way. And we then can conclude by saying that every teacher is a language teacher, right?
Exactly. I was going to say exactly that. Yeah.
Perfect.
Every teacher is a language teacher. Yeah.
Great. Georg, Thank you very much. We are unfortunately at the end of our conversation, which I enjoyed a lot. I want to thank you for your time, for your passion about this topic. And yes, I'm gonna say arrivederci to everyone. Do you have final words for us?
I just say grazie. Grazie mille, piacere. It was a pleasure to talk to you, and I hope that the listeners will like it.
For sure. Great. And thank you very much for your attention, dear audience. I'll see you then in 2 weeks. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.